Jesse. So Jesse Washington, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Well, it's inspiring to see all these faces. I took a screenshot just so I could remember, and just really pleased to be here with everybody tonight. Um, Man, where do I begin? I think I'll tell you all a little bit more about myself because it'll inform some of the discussion later. And I feel like I'm amongst kindred spirits who have this, connection to the game that I still have. So I'm 51 years old. I was born in 1969 in New York, New York. And my father was one of the few black men in America who cared nothing about sports at all. He was an artist, and we really he had a lot of, like many artists, he was brilliant and also troubled, struggled with a lot of things during his life, including drug addiction. We had a very difficult childhood. Our house burned down in Brooklyn, New York. We moved to upstate New York in the Dutchess County area, where I probably had lived in 10 homes before I graduated from high school. But I was always academically gifted. And my mom recalls telling my dad when I was young, Jesse's really smart. He could go to an Ivy League school one day. And my dad saying, we could never afford that. Sadly, there's a lot of people who still think that's true today. When I was in the third grade, I got so bored in class that they skipped me up to the fourth. So when I got to high school, but I always loved basketball. We lived in the projects, but I was an outcast in the projects because I went to private school. They didn't call me Jesse, they called me Oakwood, which was the name of my school. But then when I started circulating around the basketball court and getting a little bit good over there, I was finally accepted. And I just loved the game. I love reading and I love basketball, and that was what I did. And so unlike the majority of our young people today who will reclassify or reclassify and be older than their grade, I had skipped a grade. Plus I was had a June birthday. So I played my whole senior season of a little no-name school in Poughkeepsie, New York, with no real program whatsoever. I played my senior season at age 16. I got my 20 a game. We won our little section, and then that was it. There's no states, there's no nothing. But I didn't have these dreams of playing college basketball, but I was watching college basketball, and I was watching Georgetown basketball. I graduated from high school in 1986. We did not have a TV in our apartment. And I remember very specifically going across the hall to my neighbor, Miss Barber's house, and watching Georgetown games on a little black and white TV about as big as these computers that we're looking at now. So this made a huge impression on me because there were no Black authority figures like that I had seen. There were no teams like that, and there was nobody like John Thompson. And he sort of reminded me of my dad, only in a successful sense, a very tall, very dark, articulate, forceful Black man. But my dad had sort of been stymied at every turn and couldn't break through and was always running up against these walls that he couldn't really see but couldn't get through. And Coach Thompson had got through them and he won. So that made a deep impression on me. So I graduated from high school. I turned 17, graduated from high school a couple of days later, and I had been accepted to Yale University. Show up there and I'm just hooping every day like I normally do. I'm about 6'1", a buck 70. Now, as I was growing up in Poughkeepsie, I always had this thought in my mind, like I wasn't one day someone's going to see me as an athlete and they're going to put me down. This recruiting or, getting seen, there was no shoe circuit. Like you could go to 5-star, but we wasn't going to no 5-star. Like I had a job in the summer. But I always had in the back of my mind, someone's going to see me one day and they're going to put me on their team, like scouts. So if I was like jogging to the store, if I had to cut around the corner, I was real sharp with my cuts because somebody might be watching. So I get up to New Haven and I'm hooping every day in the gym like normal. And a couple of the assistant coaches, it was Dick Kuchin's first year in New Haven. I think he came from Vermont. And he had two coaches who had just graduated from BC, who were Roger McCready and Tim O'Shea. And we were playing together. And one day after the pickup game, they came up and they're like, hey, we need guys on the team. You want to play basketball for Yale University? And I was like, it happened. Yo, they found me. Little did I know that I was a walk-on. I was a practice player type of guy, but I was fine. I was just happy to be on a team. We had Chris Dudley. We were supposed to win it. We didn't, whatever. But as time went on, I was like, oh, I get it. I don't get to play. Now, Coach Thompson said to me, even the manager thinks he should be getting playing time. Every walk-on always thinks they should, but I was the walk-on who didn't really know he was a walk-on. Still, great experience, played for 3 years, then went on to do some other things. I became a DJ, and in the Ivies, as we know from Dartmouth, we only play on the weekends. I was making 200-300 a night. I was not playing, so I did my thing. But I became a journalist in college, started getting different jobs, and I was never a sports writer. I always wrote about other things, but I had a love for sports, and I would touch on it in the stuff that I did, particularly basketball. My career progressed, Associated Press, a bunch of hip hop magazines, Vibe, Blaze, The Source, a number of positions at the Associated Press, and then a lot of spectacular failures in my career. I was fired in a very public fashion as editor-in-chief of a Blaze magazine in a dispute with the owner. Bounce back, do my thing, start a family. And then about 3 years ago, I'm working for the Associated Press. I'm covering the national writer for race and ethnicity. So I'm like covering Obama and stuff like that. And I have married, wife, 4 children living in Western PA. I meet Coach Sutton with my son on the AAU circuit. My son wants to play ball. By this time, I do have a little bit more game. At age 51, I'm 6'4", 200, still dunking. My son is about my size, so he's trying to get on. Not super talented, super high recruit. One of those guys who has to really scrape and claw to get to get a foothold. And my son now plays for Coach Driscoll and the staff at Drexel University. Shout to the Dragons, NCAA, baby. What? So I met Coach Sutton when he was recruiting some of the more highly ranked players on my son's team. So the undefeated, I get a call from Jason Whitlock, who was somebody who I work with. I commissioned him to write a story about AI when I worked for Vibe magazine. He said, ESPN is hiring me to start a Black website. You're the first person I'm calling. And my first inclination was, well, I don't want to just be a sports writer. I want to do things that are more important than that. Like my work has to have more meaning. And I had a lot of jobs writing for rap magazines or covering celebrities or doing all this. And I felt like I was not fulfilled doing that. So I finally got this job with the Associated Press writing about racial issues. I felt I was making a difference. And I didn't want to just go and write about sports as much as I love basketball. But Jason said, no, all the stuff that you like to do there at the AP, we're going to do that at the Undefeated. Now, it didn't really work out with Jason, which is a whole nother story. But the Undefeated hired a terrific editor-in-chief, Kevin Merida. And right now, the type of work that we are able to do, I feel is very powerful, is way bigger than sports. So 2 years ago, I get a call from a literary agent who I've never met. And he says, Coach Thompson is looking to write his autobiography. I'm helping him find writers. Are you interested? Yeah, very. So I go to meet with Coach Thompson. And the first thing he says is, this isn't a book about basketball. And he was very insistent on that. And that's when it clicked in for me, because, and I said, that's great, Coach, because if it was, I would not be interested. And so that's my path about how I got to how I wrote stories and did work and everything and got in front of Coach Thompson. I had to compete with some other folks for the job. The first interview was, I wouldn't call it a grilling, but it was definitely a stiff questioning. I was wearing a polo shirt. I was wearing some stuff that I used to wear on the circuit. It was probably the exact same thing I had on when I met Coach Sutton. And my son was on the Adidas circuit. So I had on an Adidas polo, and anybody from Brooklyn, New York knows if you got an Adidas polo on, you can't wear Nike shoes because you can't be mixing and matching the brands like that. You know what I mean? So I had on some Adidas Forum Top 10s with the green stripes from the Kareem era, kind of crispy if you ask me. And then his son, John III, was there, and he said, why'd you wear Adidas over here? You know we're a Nike house. And Coach was in the back looking at me like this. Another thing that happened was I play in a pickup game when I'm in DC. I live in the Pittsburgh area, but I'm in DC a lot. The Undefeated is there. And everywhere I go, I'm getting a pickup game in. And you can see me on the internet doing my thing right now for anybody who's questioning if the former walk-on has any game. So I had a pickup game at Gonzaga High School in DC twice a week, 5:45 a.m. sharp. We're stopping at 7 sharp. It's a lot of former pros, overseas pros, Pops Mensah be in there, a lot of old Maryland guys. It's like 30 and up. I'm holding my own. JT3 asked me right in front of his dad, so how's your hoop game these days? And I knew that he already knew because they got that whole city wired. So he had already talked to Pops and a bunch of other people about, and they're waiting to see if I'm going to big myself up or whatever. So I was like, I'm doing okay. And that was all I said. So, I mean, that's how I got the job, right, for Coach Thompson. And it was a tremendous experience. The last thing I'll say before we jump into the Q&A is that I feel like my main purpose was to make this book his book. And I've read a lot of sports books and autobiographies of non-sports figures, and it does not sound like that person. The writer is putting too much of themselves into it. And he is so distinctive, and his delivery and his wisdom, it just had to sound like him. So the fact that so many people have said, I feel like Coach is talking to me when I read this, that was my main goal. And then my real goal was, if Coach Thompson is happy with this, my job is done. That is, anything else is gravy. And when we were finished, he said, and I quote, "Boy, you done good." And so, I mean, can't get any better than that. So a very rewarding experience. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. What y'all want to get into now?
All right, we're going to open it up, and we're just going to let it, free flow. If you have a question, just unmute yourself, and then just go ahead and ask Jesse the questions. But I'm gonna give you a little warning, Jesse. This group now. It's a powerful group. They ask intelligent questions. I try to give you a few of them, but they will ask intelligent questions. So we're going to start off with Mike Lopez. If you can open up the question and answer session, and then we'll go through a couple more, and then we'll truly open the floor up. So Mike, go ahead and go first. Introduce yourself and go.
Yes, I appreciate you coming on, man. I really do. Book's powerful. The reach is powerful, and just so great, to have you on with us. And so I appreciate your time. Now, I want to ask you. Lately, we've seen, I think it's 11 out of the last 16 openings went to African-American coaches, just as of, I think, yesterday. And that's a big deal. It's a super big deal. Do you feel like all those hires in any way, shape, or form might be attributed to the book, the awareness that's been happening lately, and the attention of the book as well?
I had not thought of that. I would tend to say, I hope so, but I doubt it.
Okay.
Are the people who are hiring reading the book? I hope so. I hope a few of them are. Part of me, the skeptic in me, I'm a journalist, I'm a cynic. So I want to say it's a coincidence, a luck, or just, but maybe, we've just come through an incredible period in American history, in our racial journey here in America. And if you're paying attention, the balance of power between athletes and schools and administrations and coaches is shifting. And the athletes are much more empowered now. And there has been a lot more attention on the dynamic that intentionally, unintentionally has produced this lack of representation of Black coaches at the highest level. So I think all of these things are coming together and are getting Black coaches to have more of a leg up in the hiring process. And it's funny because at the end of the first chapter of the book, Coach is talking about how America had created this discriminatory situation. And I said, Coach, do you think that this happened intentionally, unintentionally, unconsciously? Did they do it on purpose? And he just looked at me and said, fuck that, it happened. Now, we took the profanity out of the book at that point, but to your point, regardless of intent, regardless of whether it was designed or not, or just happened, the fact is there's a tremendous injustice evident in the numbers when you look at coaches. And it's very hard to explain how you can have so many Black players and so few Black coaches relative to that. So I think people are finally starting to wake up and to provide opportunities in a more equitable fashion.
And I asked that question because in one of your articles, you talked about how the book wasn't a swan song, that it was a bullhorn blast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I hope, and I pray that ADs, the decision makers, presidents, all that really, whether they read the book or not, or heard pieces of the book that were influential enough coming from, a man like Coach John Thompson, and we're able to kind of sway them too, in a way, because I think sometimes it's not intentional, maybe for some people. For some people it is, but now their intentionality is going to kick in to say, I got to do the right thing at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so many basketball is like any other profession where so many hires happen just because of a network and who you're friends with and coach really calls attention to the way these things work, and so hopefully it will shake people up and cause them to look out of their immediate circle, of acquaintances and recommendations and to give everybody a fair shot.
Next question, Sharif Hassan.
Thanks, Coach Sutton. I'll just start with when I got the text the other day, man, I was super excited because I do follow you, Jesse. Follow you on Twitter also. I had the book. I bought the book a couple weeks ago, hadn't opened it. And then when I got the text from Coach Sutton, boom, right away, just finished a chapter on Patrick Ewing. And you are correct. It sounds like Coach is talking. Never had the opportunity to meet him, but I'm from the DC area, currently the athletic director at Susquehanna University in Central PA. I'm a piggyback on Mike. Mike, I thought you were still on my thunder a little bit. Understand, Coach mentioned in the book when he was, starting out early at Georgetown, Black coaches didn't want to send him players because they were more in favor of sending them to white coaches, thinking that it might further their career, that kind of thing, or not trusting of Black coaches yet. What he talked about Black referees was just amazing. But the question is, with the social unrest we had last summer with the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, do you feel like not only has I had 10 out of 15, Mike, it might be up to 11 out of 16, but the recent hires with Black coaches, do you think that will lead athletes, your son, your daughter's going to be playing D1 in the fall, but do you feel like more Black high school athletes will trend towards HBCUs or towards PWIs with Black head coaches?
The HBCU piece is difficult because they're so disadvantaged. They don't have the funds, the facilities, and there's a perception that you won't get as good a shot. And everybody now is trying to play up, and everybody's like looking for a bigger stage to be on, and I think that's unfortunate. Even when they're on a big, huge stage, the young man just left Georgetown. I'm dumbfounded. Like, you can learn from Patrick Ewing, dog. Like, how many other schools are going to feed the post? Does anybody feed the post except Georgetown? They were going to you in that L you took in the turn. Anyway, let me stop. So I was really disappointed that McCord Maker didn't get to play this season because that really could have. But here's another thing, man. So my daughter is a high school senior, and she chose to play for a Black coach, Marissa Mosley, at Boston University. She was recruited by a lot of other coaches, and she didn't say, I'm choosing the Black coach. But I know that she was impacted by that, and on some level saw a Black woman as someone that she wanted to play for. My daughter was interested in Howard, and asked, and she asked her AAU director, Coach Tate with the Bruins, can you hook me up? And they expressed some interest, but it never really happened, and there's a lot of reasons for that, So I think the HBCU piece is tough. And Coach Thompson really talks about how integration killed all of our Black institutions. And that's too harsh of a word. So I also think, though, that the whole college landscape, and this is probably just more so for basketball, is about to get shaken up because there's so many professional options going to be out there now for these 17 and 18-year-old kids. Overtime just started this league. You got David West and Ricky Valenti with the Professional Collegiate League. There was a story on the Undefeated today about another pro league that I never heard of. Kids are going overseas. And so I think that that is going to level the haves and the have-nots at college basketball, because you're going to take out those Zion Williamson level guys. Most of them are going to be gone. So the talent level is going to be closer, and the HBCUs can catch a little bit more rec. All it takes is a nice deep run from A&T or Howard or somebody else. And I got my money on Moten, you know?
Yes. Yep.
So I do think that there will be, and I hope that there will be some more movement in that direction.
Next question, Kyle Adams.
Jesse, good to see you. Really, really happy to see that the book is really picking up. And my question is stemming from, you know, how did it feel for you to see when the guys got to the tournament in Indiana that they all were gifted the book?
Yeah.
So my question is, how did that make you feel to see that? Mm-hmm. And what's kind of been some of the response that you've gotten maybe from coaches or better yet, student athletes?
Yeah. First of all, can I see that shirt right there, dog?
Oh, absolutely.
Can I see that shirt? Let me see that.
Kyle. Come on. Show us the shirt, Kyle.
Yo.
Come on now.
Yo. Holding out, dog. You are holding out.
We just got these. just fresh.
Woo. That is tremendous. Okay. So the book being at the NCAA tournament was a total surprise. My son shot me a pic when Drexel arrived in Indy and said, "Pop, they got your book." And I was like, wow, did they just do that for Drexel? Because they knew? Like, I had no idea. Eventually figured out that it was Dan Gavitt, the son of Coach's dear friend Dave Gavitt. You all know who Dan Gavitt is. And he arranged for every team to receive a copy. So I was blown away. And I thought that the reason why I was blown away was because that would be so meaningful for Coach. He loved the NCAA tournament. I do not believe that he ever missed one. I don't believe, they canceled it in the last year of his life. So he loved the NCAA tournament, and to have it put in the hands of student athletes, I think would mean a tremendous amount to him. And so the reception that I've been getting has been wonderful. And it really sort of peaked, things came together because Georgetown made the tournament and Coach's book was at the tournament, and nobody expected Georgetown to make the tournament. Mm-hmm. And Patrick is such a pivotal, figure and so interconnected with Coach's legacy. And so it all sort of came together to create a huge amount of awareness about Coach and his book and Georgetown that I think was very impactful. And then you couldn't get it on Amazon. It was like sold out.
Wow.
And so, I was very, very rewarded. A little bit of breaking news. We're all aware of the disparities, the shameful disparities between the women's tournament and the men's tournament. And so Coach's family and David Falk have arranged to rush some books down there, at least in time for the Sweet 16. So the women in the Sweet 16, we couldn't get them there for the first round, but the women in the Sweet 16, at Coach's family's expense, will receive those books. So, I'm very gratified by that, and I know that Coach would love that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
Jesse, Tiffany was totally spearheading that, right?
Oh man, absolutely. She does not play, and everybody. Man, we were sitting around one time with Coach, and we were talking about something, and Coach didn't dwell on his own passing or things, but he was an intelligent man, and the way he talked about it, sometimes he would refer to things that would happen when he was no longer with us. And during one of those conversations, someone came up about who would be making the decisions, and Tiffany was sitting there, and he just went and pointed at her. And Tiffany Thompson is the one who came up with the idea for the title of the book. Totally her idea. And as soon as she said it, I got goosebumps. It was so perfect.
Can you, before we go to the next question, can you explain the title of the book in the poem, if you will?
Yes. So Coach Thompson grew up idolizing a bunch of athletes. And he said, I had no idea. He said, I lived in the Frederick Douglass projects, but I had no idea who Frederick Douglass was. That his mom went to the same high school as Charles Drew and Benjamin Davis and all these other luminaries. He didn't know who they were because they were kept from him. So he had an uncle who was a poet in the Harlem Renaissance. And this was the first Black man who he saw celebrated for using his mind. And his uncle wrote a poem called I Came as a Shadow. And Coach just, Coach didn't sit down and say, okay, in this chapter, it's going to be like that. Coach would just start talking and let it rip. And I had to keep up. And he'd be quoting poetry. And I was like, wow, John Thompson's quoting poetry. And then he quoted it again. And then I went and looked up the poem. And then the light bulb went off. And I was like, Coach, you identify with the subject of that poem? And then he looked at me like, all right, I might keep this kid around. So that's where it came from. I came as a shadow. I stand now a light. The depth of my darkness transfigures your night.
Mind blown. Next question, Nima.
Jesse, how you doing? I had a chance to, I listened to the book on tape, and throughout the time I'm listening to it, I was rewinding, and this is pretty fun to be able to ask you this, because I wondered to myself, like, I wonder how this conversation went. And so now I can find out. So there's two parts of the book that I'd love to know, what else did he talk about that maybe you could shed some light on. One is the relationship with Dean Smith, and then the other is the Prop 48 protest, specifically with the Prop 48 protest and the players now with the hashtag not NCAA property. Like what else did he learn and talk about in that? Because I mean, he was. It sounded like he was pretty transparent. Like he wasn't sure how that thing was going to go. He wasn't sure how it was going to be received. He told other coaches, "Don't do what I'm about to do." Like, what was the other conversation that you guys had around those two subjects?
Yeah, it was a lot. And, Coach figured out a lot of how he felt about these things as he went along. And so, he was living life and he was not, particularly with his greatest accomplishments, I had to pull it out of him because they had been celebrated so much. And he was not a braggadocious person. So with Prop 42, the biggest thing was that he was sort of scared, because he did it and he was nervous. And he said in the book, the motherfucker who ain't scared ain't no hero, because he didn't care anyway. And Coach was very sparing with how he used the profanity in the book. In real life, it was bang, 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 bang. But he told me to take most of it out, which was tough. And he kept saying, there's too much profanity in the book. And I'm like, Coach, that's on you, But so with Proposition 42, I think that he didn't say it, but the subtext of that whole thing was that he was proud to beat the NCAA. And he never said it, but he was like, I beat those motherfuckers. I made them change the rules. And he was proud at all the coaches who had criticized him or said he should be fired, that, oh no, no, that's not how it went down. But he would never say, I'm proud of it. He would never put that out because he didn't want to, aggrandize himself. So that was sort of the subtext behind Prop 42. And then he was delighted. I don't know if it came through in the book, but when the second game, the big one that we all remember is him walking out of the Boston College game and dramatically walking off the court. The other thing about that is that it was very strategic how he set it up. He didn't just dip out of the game without letting anybody know. He told people what he was going to do. He had a news conference. He waited for all the cameras to get there, and then he walked out. Extremely strategic. But the next game was up at Providence, and he didn't go. And he was so pleased that Charles Smith hit the winning shot. And he said he was yelling at the TV, give the fucking ball to Charles. And then Charles hit the winning bucket. So that's sort of the backstory between Prop 42. Now, please remind me of the first part of your question. There was another part.
About his relationship with Dean Smith. So
Yeah.
the book, you mentioned it a lot. And if I feel like it was, he didn't give us as much as maybe there was, but it's pretty fascinating that, Dean Smith was a strong guiding light for him.
Yeah, because it's apples and oranges, right? Like you don't put those two together. I had no clue. And I read a lot. I'm 51 years old. I read a lot more than your average person. And I had no idea, no idea. Man, he loved Dean Smith. But the thing was that everyone portrayed John Thompson as this racist who doesn't like white people. It was really interesting to me. Far along in the process, I was always trying to get him to go down this Malcolm X route. And he was always like, nah, not really. And finally he said, yeah, people tried to say I was Malcolm X because Malcolm hated white people. So they were trying to say I hated white people. So the most profound thing that he said about Dean Smith was, he's the only person I would ever be an assistant coach for. Wow. And they had many, many late night conversations. He would call him for help, or just to vent. And he got so much of his coaching from him. And so, he didn't hold much back. There were parts of the book where he held stuff back. Dean Smith, he didn't hold too much back. If anything, I was unable to really get the full depth of his love for this man. And there was probably like things that I could have pulled up to really illuminate and illustrate the depth of their relationship. The one thing that I thought he said was very telling was, Dean Smith looked at my clothes and was like, yo, you got to dress better. He said, you got these cheap jackets, you got no lining in your jacket. What are you doing? You got to dress better. And imagine a white man saying that to John Thompson and Coach Thompson accepting it. That tells you right there what he thought about Dean Smith.
Yeah, Jesse, Coach Thompson was Coach Smith's assistant coach on the 76 Olympic team.
Yes, sir.
And that's when the relationship really, really, really grew. And then in turn, people don't realize this, but fortunate enough having worked at Georgetown to hear this story, Sleepy Floyd wanted to go to Carolina, and Carolina didn't recruit him. But Dean Smith told Sleepy Floyd where to go to school, and he told John Thompson about him, and the rest is history. So I think that right there sums up the relationship.
He was getting worthy. He was getting the blue chipper, and Coach Thompson had to get. And Coach Thompson prided himself on getting guys who were overlooked. Mm-hmm. But Coach Thompson said that Coach Gaines, Big House Gaines, told him to get on him.
Yeah.
But probably Dean did too, I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised. That's a good piece of information. Thank you.
No question. Next question goes to John Wick. Jay Wick.
Jesse, I want to say thank you for hopping on tonight and dropping some great stories on us. My question for you is, what was the biggest conception about quote unquote Big John?
That it was dispelled with the book, that he was a racist. Like, there's a couple, I got friends, white liberal guys, Black Lives Matter and all that. And my man, when he found out I was writing on the book, he said, is Coach going to talk about why he wouldn't recruit white players? So even the good white people thought Coach Thompson was a racist, So that was the biggest thing to me. I wouldn't call it a surprise because I knew he wasn't a racist, but to find out the depth of the relationships that he had with so many white folks, Dean Smith, Red Auerbach, his AD, Frank Rienzo, Mary Fenlon, and on and on and on. Like, some of his, he said, hey man, at this point in my life, I got more close friends who are white than Black. He was straight up about it, And also I was surprised to find out how many white players he recruited, how many white players he had early on who got real minutes for him. I was shocked to find, I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was shocked to find out documented instances of white older guys telling white recruits, don't go play for John Thompson. He's just looking for a white token. He's going to discriminate against you. Like, how dastardly is that? So that was the biggest misconception, I think, that was dispelled. The second biggest thing, and I knew, was the way he dealt with the intimidation thing. So his team it was such a I'm not even going to ramble on because you really have to read the book to get it in his words. But I'll just say this. I read Alonzo Mourning's autobiography in preparation for this. And Alonzo wrote in his book, I was intimidated by John Thompson. And yet Coach Thompson never tried to intimidate anybody. And that perception of him as trying to intimidate people bothered him more than being called a racist. So those are the two big things.
Next question, Dr. Gill.
Yeah, appreciate that, Coach Sutton.
Yes, sir.
Just a little background on the question. So I work in mental health with athletes, right? And so I reached out to the alumnus of an ACC school that had given a lot of money to the school on behalf of mental health. Had an hour-long conversation with the guy. And then we get to the end, and I don't know how we made it to Coach Thompson, but he says, well, I think he was a racist. And at first, I was like, just great conversation, it just went south really quick. And then I thought, well, I'm gonna send him a book. Then I'm like, no, I can't spend that money because he probably ain't gonna read it. But it just sort of stunned me for a few minutes. And so my question, Jesse, is, have you had any people to come up to you and say, you know what, I thought he was a racist, but I read the book and I've changed my mind?
I've not to that level, but now I understand. And I've had a lot of people come and say, I have a much deeper understanding of why he did what he did now. Or things of that nature, they would say. Oh, okay, I have, now I get it. Or I was wrong about a lot of the things that I thought about him. But that, I have been infuriated by a lot of people who, their uninformed comments about Coach Thompson to this day. Oh yeah, it was, he got all them, it wasn't right that he got all them basketball players into Georgetown. They didn't deserve to be there. They were thugs. Like, people are still saying this stuff, man, and it's infuriating. It's infuriating. And really the reason is because they think they're the ones who should be going to Georgetown, but they weren't good enough to get in. Yeah. But they think that they think one of 12 basketball players took your spot, where really it was the 500 legacy cases and the 300 congressman's kids who caked up Georgetown to get you in. Like, but you're not mad at them, you're mad at the 12 basketball players. Yeah. Don't get me started, man. Don't get me started.
And being infuriated, that's one feeling. Do you feel like you need to send them a book, or does it hold you for about 5 or 10 minutes?
I'll send them one, but I ain't paying for it. That's gonna come out the publisher pocket. Email me that name and address on the low, and it's gonna be anonymous. It's just gonna pop up with no, you know what I'm saying? And then hopefully they'll get the picture. But no, it's infuriating, man. It's infuriating. And so imagine what Coach had to deal with his whole career, having all that on him. Like, how do you live through that and still excel and still graduate your players and still win games? Like, it's amazing. His strength through that was amazing. And that's one thing, to the brother's previous questions about things that he didn't really get into. That's one thing he really downplayed in his book. And I would ask him, Coach, how did you do it? He's like, and he would always say the same thing. Yeah, well, I dealt with it. He was made for it, man. God made that man to do what he did.
Next question, Aisha Foy.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Man.
Cool. So my question is, what are you proud of most as a writer in the book? And besides, John Thompson being happy with it, but just like with your skill set, what you were able to accomplish, what are you proud of most, and what's your goal for the book as well?
Thank you for asking that. That's very kind, because the book is really about him. So you let me get my shine on a little bit. Thank you. Before we proceed, please tell me the title of your book again, because I want to get it.
It's called Success is My Major. Start Entitled, Leave Unforgettable.
Aisha, put the book up. It's behind you, right? Put it up.
Okay.
Let me tell everybody right now, run and get this one.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good. So what am I proudest of? I'm proudest that it sounds like him, but I'll let you guys in on a little secret. And there was when Coach Sutton sent me some of the questions, I'm going to refer to something that was asked there. There was a line. So when we started working on it, and I was working on the early chapters, and basically, like, Coach let his granddaughter Morgan read it. She's a Princeton graduate, and they were like, "Yeah, this is boring." You know what I'm saying? And I was like, "Dang!" And then his son JT3 was like, "Jesse, we read a lot of stuff that you've written, you know, all your work, and this doesn't sound like that." I'm like, "Well, I know. I'm trying to make it sound like your dad." He's like, "Yeah, but we really like that stuff that you write for the Undefeated." And I was like, "So what are you telling me?" And he was like, "Well, you know," and then he was sort of somewhere. I was like, "Wait, you want me to put a little bit more of my flavor on it?" And he was like, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, you want me to take more shots? Like, I get to take more shots?" Because I was really just playing defense and passing the rock. And they were like, "Yeah, you could take more shots." So there was a point in the book where he was talking about how he was attending Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And then they thought he couldn't read, he had a reading disability, and they thought that he was, quote, the unfortunate word that they used at that time was retarded. They thought he was retarded, and they told him to leave. And so I'm over here sitting in this same room late one night, and I'm like, yeah, I guess the help wasn't so perpetual after all. It sounded like something Coach would say, because Coach is mad funny. Like, he had jokes. He would say, like, he was very, very funny. But that was something I just threw in there. So next time we met, you know, and I read it to him, and he was like, you know, he didn't say anything. He let it go. And then we were in meetings with the publisher. So the way the books are sold is that you write up basically sort of a sample of how the book's going to go. It's an outline, a couple sample chapters, and you give it to the publishers, and then they come and bid on it. And so we were meeting with a publisher, and Coach is just talking and telling the story. He's like, yeah, then they thought I was retarded, and they kicked me out of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And then he repeated my line. And he said, I guess the help wasn't so perpetual after all. And when he said it, he looked at me. He didn't, it was just a tiny glance with a twinkle in his eye. He didn't wink. And I was like, I felt like I was playing for him. And he brought that out of me a lot. He coached me while we were writing this book in terms of praising me when I did stuff that he liked, praising my work ethic. He was like, oh, Jesse, you're not lazy. I like that about you. Well, of course, I'm going to go harder, you know? And so I'm very proud that I was able to put that line in there. And there's a few more that I'm not going to say what they are, you know, but that I was able to do these things in Coach's name and help him look good. So that's what I'm proud of. And then please repeat the second. I want to be specific. Please repeat the second part of your question.
I think it was what is your goal
yes,
with the book?
yes. So, man, you know, nobody's asked me that yet. So big up to you for coming up with, you know, what is my goal? I think my goal is what Coach's goal was to let Coach define himself, and then people can learn from that. You know, he was somebody who was so widely discussed and mischaracterized, and a lot of times people say good things about him, and he was praised. But then, you know, to let him define himself, and then just by reading it, young people, administrators, teachers, athletes, parents, everybody can get something out of that. You know, whether it's a gem like, you know, communication is when they listen to you. Motivation is when they act on it. You know, like, there's so many pieces of advice in there. So my goal is for people to get that advice and act on it.
That's powerful. Powerful there. Next question, Tracy Adams.
Thank you.
Tracy Jones, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Jesse. Always a pleasure to connect with you
what's
again.
What's up? Yes, sir.
So I did a session on Monday with a Division III institution. And, you know, I shared this page because, you know, I love, you know, to be a coach, that chapter, because that's where I feel Coach just empties out the clip, right? And so, you know, a lot, it's just this one quote, though, and I want you to speak on it in regards to the transfer portal right now, right?
Ooh.
And so, you know, Coach says, capitalism is a system we operate in. College basketball is subject to the laws of supply and demand. The amateurism of big-time college sports is antiquated and needs to be redefined. We shouldn't act like going to college is a religious experience for everybody. And the session we had Monday, it's a Division III school, and it was more of a finance discussion because their numbers are down, right? Some of these schools did not play, and I feel a lot of coaches are taking it personal that players aren't returning without really considering the business side of it. So, Coach was a businessman in this day and age. How would he respond to this transfer portal situation?
Well, first I got to say I love the background because I'm close to Wu-Tang, but that paddle got to go. That's the other thing that I got to say.
It's a good year.
Somebody mute that dude. Mute that
Bro, that paddle got to stay, Trace. I'm with you, dog. I got you.
Same, we're part of a good year. Good year. 1911 is a good year.
Man, Coach didn't. So I'm meeting with Coach throughout Georgetown's transfer difficulties. I mean, we were there when Mac was there. We were there when them kids got in trouble and Fordham raised up out of there. They probably transferred themselves. We were there when James Akinjo left. And he never criticized the kids, very rarely. I don't want to say never, and that was his biggest characteristic. His whole mindset was to protect these kids. So I never heard him criticize these kids for wanting to transfer, even though, as he said in the book, it's very troubling, and I think he would probably blame the parents more so. And the people around them for leading him down the wrong path, because he had a lot of things to say about parents, but again, he didn't want to criticize a lot of people. Like, that's why that chapter to be a coach really stands out, because he did empty the clip and he saved the whole clip for the end of the book. He could have lit a lot of people up, but he didn't. So, I'm really trying to figure out, this new era with the transfers and balance out the rights of players with the developing the character to persevere through tough situations and to be, to show gratitude for where you're at. But Coach didn't really, I don't want to put words in his mouth. He didn't criticize it a lot. He was always somebody who, and if he was here right now, he would give you his thoughts, pro and con. And he would have things to say on it that I would not have thought of. But I know for a fact that he would lay out, okay, here's why it's good for some of these kids to do it. And here's why some of these kids and their AAU coaches and parents are tripping, And so he would take it on a case-by-case basis. For some kids, they should. And Coach was somebody who transferred a lot of kids, mostly because they wouldn't go to class. Like, if you didn't go to class, you would wake up and be, at another school. But for other people, it's a raw move. He was, I'm going to lower my voice. He was not too happy with young Mr. McClung. I will say that. That's as far as I'm going to go with that one.
Next question, Harold Harris.
Yo, Jesse, Harold E. Harris Jr., brother. I am a new fan, but I tell you, brother, I appreciate you because I've known Kevin Sutton since we battled. I was at Benedictine and he was at Oak Hill, and we were battling in basketball high school, and we went to JMU together. But here's the thing. Talk to me about the evolution of your writing, because as a new author, and Kev has some stuff that he's going to send you, talk to me about what you wrote that came from in your spirit. Forget about all the academic stuff. I'm talking about when you by yourself and you have the Holy Spirit speak to you and it's like, I need to write this right here. I don't know how I wrote it. I don't know the words, but it simply comes out of you. Talk to this group about that, because as a writer, when that happens to you, that's a magical moment that most people never get to experience. They think about it academically. Talk to us about how that felt for you, and I appreciate you, brother. And I'm going to get your book tomorrow, so I'm on it. I appreciate you. You got the floor, man. But I appreciate Kevin having me here to experience you and as well as the other group.
Thank you for asking that. Thank you very much. Prayer is an integral part of my writing process. And I pray often when I sit down, before I sit down to write. And my late father instructed me, if you're trying to accomplish something, Jesse, you got to work as hard as you can to do it. You got to pray as hard as you can to do it. And then you got to go after it. But one without the other isn't going to work. You can't just pray and not put the work in and expect things to go right. And you can't just work without the prayer and not expect things to go right. And so the things that come from my spirit, I'm fortunate to be in a position with this book and with my work at the Undefeated where I get to write about things I really care about. And specifically with this book, I was like inhabiting Coach and just felt so strongly that I could give voice to these issues that are still so important. One place where I really felt that was the Proposition 42 section, where he was explaining why the educational system as it still exists today is unfair against poor people who are disproportionately Black, and why it's unfair to judge kids by a test when they don't have the same level of preparation like that. And so that came from definitely in here. And then, but there's other things that I've written in my career that were very meaningful to me. There's one story that I wrote when the Undefeated launched. It serendipitous lined up with the 100-year, I don't want to call it an anniversary, I would say commemoration of the lynching, the infamous lynching of another person named Jesse Washington in Waco, Texas. One of the most infamous lynchings in American history. And his name was Jesse Washington. And I'd been following this case for years. I got to go down there and it just spoke to me because he had my name. So I felt that, and I think it came out on the page. But another article that really came out, I wrote an article about why I had to stop playing basketball in the pandemic, and it's just basketball, but it's bigger than basketball. And a lot of us here on this call today, our identities are connected to this game, for better or for worse, and oftentimes for both. And so I had to struggle my way through that in the pandemic, and I was doing things, I was putting myself at risk. Coach O'Driscoll Coltrane was home from at the beginning of the pandemic, and he was out hooping, and I was like, son, you got to be careful, your transmission, and I was worried. And then one day I was down at the playground by myself on the other side, just working out. And the kids started congregating on the other end, and they were like, hey, yo, Mr. Washington, we got 9. You trying to run? Like, you can't say no. You number 10. If you don't play, you a sucker. You are a sucker. So then I was like, yeah, let me get this game in real quick, and I'm gonna go home, and I'm not gonna tell anybody at the house. We got my wife, 4 kids. I'm just gonna slide up in the crib and act like I was just working out. I step in the house, and Coltrane, my son, and my wife are standing there, and Coltrane said, hey, yo, Dad, my dudes texted me from the court and said, come down here and guard your pops. So I was cold busted off the rip. So I say that to mean that the things that I write, I'm very fortunate to write about things that I'm passionate about. And I'm very passionate about basketball. It means something to me. It's still a part of my identity as a 51-year-old man who scored 2 points in his college career. And when you can do that, and when you can really tap into that spiritual element, I think it shows in the result, like Coach's book.
Well done, brother. Keep it moving. You're doing great. Big fan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next question, Rob.
Jesse, I'll piggyback on that a little bit. Everybody knows Jesse's son plays for us at Drexel, so I will vouch for Jesse's playing ability. He can still get up the jumper and hold his own on the court.
Thanks, Coach.
For one thing, I know obviously you wrote the book about Coach Thompson. I don't want to speak for you, but if anybody has the chance to talk to Jesse about other things he's written and other things he's covered, he has some great stories that aren't sports related that I don't want to get into the Wyclef Jean story, but that's one of the most phenomenal stories I've ever heard. So if you ever have a chance to talk to him, he could share some unbelievable stories. And my thing was, I just wanted to ask you, you've come on and talked to our guys, especially this summer with all the social unrest and the social injustice. And I think you have a clear, loud voice that is heard right now. What's next for you? And what are you working on any books right now? Obviously you're writing stories all the time, but what's your next project? What do you want to do from here?
Thanks for asking, Coach. And you know, I really try to give my son space to live his life. So I'm not one of these dads who's all up on people all the time and his coaches and him. It's his career, it's his college experience. So I found out on social media that Drexel players took a knee. I didn't even know. He wasn't, you know, and I was like, wow, son, for real? It was like that? And that was very meaningful to my son. And the support that you guys as a staff showed Coach O'Driscoll, and what Coach Spiker said publicly when asked about them taking a knee at the NCAA tournament was very meaningful to support these young men in doing what they feel is right. So thank you for that. And as far as what's next for me, man, I do want to think about what the next book is. And I have a number of ideas, and I want to choose the right one. I'm very intrigued by what's going on in college athletics and the way that the ground is shifting very rapidly. And I think 5 years from now, it's going to look totally different than what it is now. And, you know, I want to do something that has some meaning to it. And I've also been able to get into to start doing some documentaries recently. The Undefeated, a great platform. I produced a documentary on the March in Washington, Then and Now. You can see it on Hulu. And there's a couple other doc opportunities that I have. And so I would like to do more film, because unfortunately, I think that a lot of people, you know, fewer people want to read now, and our attention spans are shorter. But I absolutely have another book coming up. And when it does, and it's not about Coach Thompson, I hope that I will have a fractionally receptive audience as with this one. But, you know, Coach knew he was hooking me up, man. And he knew that he was putting me in a good position to continue to elevate. And he didn't push it in my face, but it was evident, and he enjoyed that. My favorite time when he said that was we were sitting around strategizing about something, and he said, we got to make sure when the book comes out that Jesse gets an opportunity to do this and do that, because it's, you know, because it's his first book. And then the literary agent said, nah, Jess wrote another book before. And then Coach said, yeah, but you know, nobody read that but his mom and that. So. And he gave me a smile. So he knew he was hooking me up. And when he asked me to do the audiobook, which was a great honor, and then he said, and I quote, boy, make sure they give you a nice extra check for that. So thank you, Coach. The check cleared.
Hey, Jesse, when you write that book about the landscape of basketball, I definitely want to contribute. I got a whole lot of opinions about this thing.
And you know, this if I could ask a favor, but this group is such a, you know, a powerful group here. I would be privileged to remain in contact with you. If anyone who saw fit to just drop your name and email address in there, so I could remain in contact and call upon you for your expertise and information at a certain time, I would be really appreciative. So if you don't mind putting that in the chat, and then I'll copy and paste it, and then that would be great. And by the same token, which is something that Coach always said, if anyone ever has if I could ever be of any use to anybody, if you ever have a story that you need to be told, then I'm very easy to find. I'm jessewashington@gmail.com. I'll put my cell phone number in there. One instance of that happening is Rasir Bolton's dad called me up and was like, we have something that's been going on with us and we want to talk to you about it. And Rasir Bolton is the young man who transferred from Penn State to Iowa State. And then after I wrote that story, we all know how that ended up. So, so, you know, if anyone got them news tips, holla at your boy.
Absolutely. Next question, Justin Bradley.
Yeah, Jesse, no, this has been amazing for me, especially as a young Black coach, because I know Coach Thompson, you know, just as the figure, as the towel guy, who was a good coach at Georgetown. So, you know, getting these details and these stories and anecdotes has been really powerful for me. Coach Sutton and I briefly talked about it over the phone, and he said, once you finish it, we'll talk more about it, because I know his perspective, being from the area and working there, is far greater than mine. I just finished chapter 14, so that was the Rayful chapter, and I finished it probably a week ago, and I had to put it down because it felt like a movie And, you know, even the last sentence, I think it was something like Alonzo did the right thing and John Turner made a different decision. And so after that entire chapter, for that to be the ending was really powerful for me. So I had to put it down for a couple of days. But can you talk a little bit about, you know, not necessarily that chapter, but just all of these stories that you were able to hear and write down and ask further details and you know, were there times where you were like, is this right? Did this really happen? And that chapter specifically stood out to me as you know, the drug kingpin in the area just coming in his office and being like, yes, coach, no, sir, whatever you need, Coach Thompson. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, yeah. Very quick detour. Winter '86. I'm a freshman at the end of the bench for Yale. We go up to Dartmouth. It was the old gym, and y'all had some fraternity would sit right behind the visiting bench, and they went in on everybody. And after they got finished heckling all the starters, they were heckling the scrubs. Like they got down, was heckling me. I was like, really? It's like that? And they were going hard. And then at the end of the game, it was a close game, and y'all had a bunch of tough brothers on that team, and a skirmish broke out on the court, like a little shoving, not an all-out fight. And my benchmate, Mike McMahon, took that opportunity to douse one of them cats with a glass of water in the face. And then we had the brawl. They had to make us go in the locker room while we finished the game out. That was my Dartmouth experience up there.
Oh,
so
man,
that was fun. I'm sure they're a lot more well-behaved now in your nice new gym. So the stories were epic, and there were so many. And Coach was so nonchalant about them. You know, like Coach, I'd be like, but then, yeah. And like, I mean, think about it. This is a man who is in some of the most epic college basketball games ever. You know, I mean, I had to pull it out of him. He was in the Boston Garden when for the shot, Havlicek stole the ball. And I'm like, so I had to pull it out of him. So what I would do was get a lot of information, research, an article, I read it to him, I'll pull up a video and we'd watch it together. And then he would start to get into the stories. So the Rayful Edmond in particular, though, he knew what a monumental story that was. And you're a little younger, but for so many of us, like Rayful Edmonds, even separate from John Thompson, was like a well-known figure in the hood. And I was in New York. And we knew who this dude was. His name rang out like that, like rapper style before the rappers were really that big. And so many people were interested in that. And it was such a dicey moment and nobody knew. So he was very careful with that story. And of course, I asked him a month in, I said, yeah, so Rayful, he was like, nah, we're not getting to that yet. Like, I think he wanted to make sure that I was going to be the guy to finish the book. Because just because I started it didn't mean I couldn't get benched or kicked off the team, you know? I had to prove myself. But gradually he let it out bit by bit. And he called that guy Bootney Green, who's not Bootney, not Green, but the player by the name of Bootney, who was Rayful's ace dude, still works at Georgetown. And he called him up and we had a whole conversation about that. And Bootney was like, Coach, I thought you told me to take this to my grave. And he was like, no, you can say it now. This is for my book. It's okay. So, you know, he wanted to really deliver a message with that chapter also. And the message was, don't think that these people are irredeemable. Don't think that this is a problem that we have in our community. And we need to do something about it. And this is a problem for us all to solve. Wow. You know, that was the biggest thing that I got out of that. And so he wanted to convey that by the way he described Rayful, by the way he made sure to say this was an intelligent young man, by the way he said that he respected him. He didn't condone what he did, but he respected him as a human being. Coach was extraordinarily careful and particular. And that was the chapter that we reviewed over and over and over to make sure it was exactly what he wanted to say. And the way we reviewed it was, I would read it. And so, you know, and then he would change a couple things. And then it would be 2 weeks later, he'd be like, yeah, Jesse, why don't you read that Rayful chapter real quick? You know, okay. And I read it again. And he would change a little nuance here or a sentence over here. And then, okay, yeah, read that Rayful again. So he was exactly everything, like more than any other chapter in the book, that is word for word had his attention. And the second chapter, the second most highly attentionized chapter, that's not a word, in the book is Allen Iverson. he was particular with that. But thanks for asking, man. The Rayful thing, it is a movie, and hopefully one day it will be.
Yeah. No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question, Jack Castleberry.
Hey, sorry if you hear crying in the background. I got
bring it on. We love it. We love it. Congrats.
So, hey, thanks for being here, Jesse. It's been awesome. John Thompson obviously was such a kind of a shining example of what a basketball coach is supposed to be, and the fact that not just he won games, but the impact that he had. And it feels like today we've gotten away from that at some point, so or at least to some degree. So the question I have for you is, did Coach Thompson speak to any of that, of what he may be disappointed in today's basketball coaches?
Yes, and he was very careful not to name names, but he was disappointed that people, I mean, the money is so big now. And these coaches, particularly at the top level, are making so much money that sort of becomes and to make money, you got to win. And so that sort of becomes your priority, you know, and winning is just because you won this year, don't mean you can't get fired 3 years later. I mean, he makes a point in the book, 4 Black coaches won a national championship. He's the only one who retired. Everyone else, Tubby Smith won his first year out and they shoved him out of there. So he is disappointed that more coaches don't speak up when they have something to lose. Yeah, you speak up when you're comfortable or when you're retired and things like that, but will you do it when you have something to lose? Will you put some of your capital on the line to stand up for what's right? He was disappointed in that. And he was very disappointed in the fact, and not necessarily in the coaches, but in college basketball and in our society, that there are no coaches with his level of stature. There's no Black coaches with the level of influence that him, Nolan Richardson, Coach Chaney, and Coach Raveling had. So in that sense, we've moved backwards, you know, and but at the same time, there's still and a question that came forward before is, do you see any other Coach Thompsons? And everyone always looks, this might have been, I can't remember, this might have been in Kyle Adams' session. I think it was.
It was.
Everyone always looks for the next Coach Thompson. And this is why I get so much out of these things, because I learn things from y'all. Everyone looks for the next Coach Thompson. Oh, is it Shaka Smart? Is it Leonard Hamilton? And in Kyle Adams' session, it was like, no, it's that high school coach who is following in Coach Thompson's footsteps and changing lives year after year after year. It's coaches on your level, assistants, and people who have internalized that message and who are really, you know, and at all levels of college basketball and youth basketball, who are really helping people and are living out his examples of, you know, and they're not the ones making the big money. So it's, you know, I'm sad to say, but it's easier for them to do it.
That sounds like Coach Sutton, Jesse.
It does. It really does. You know? Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's where I see him. So, but he was disappointed, you know, in some of these, you know, he didn't put this on a person, but he would say these handkerchief head, you know who's. He was disappointed, man.
Yeah. Next question, Samantha Smith.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks so much for being on tonight. My question for you is 2 parts, so I can repeat if you need me to. Did Coach Thompson share any advice for young coaches looking to attain any amount of success he had through his career? And also for you, I want to touch on you personally. What advice do you have for young professionals trying to attain the success you have as well? Like, how do you find that passion?
So the advice that he had was that 70%. That was the biggest thing. And he went back to that a lot. Now, for those of you who have had the good fortune to talk with Coach Thompson, he would repeat himself. you know, one of the endearing things about him. So that 70%, it came up a lot. So what that is that 70% of your success as a coach has nothing to do with basketball. It's all the other things around it, you know? And so his advice was to look at it as a teaching role, because, you know, that's really the definition of success for him, was people he was able to help. But again, in classic multi-layered Coach Thompson fashion, he said, but I had to win in order to get the opportunity to help people. So that balance is tough. And he struggled with that a lot, you know? And he said, I had to fight against my own instincts to win. And I felt that too, you know, I mean, as a parent of kids who play basketball, you know, in the abstract, I'm like, man, them grades better be right or you ain't playing. But when the grades slip and that big game is coming, I'm like, you know, well, so I think the advice that he had was to focus on that 70% of all the other things. And that's how you are successful as a coach. That 70% of things that doesn't have to do with basketball. And then for me, you know, my advice for young people would be, in just career-wise, would be to latch on to that thing that you're passionate about. I believe that my best writing comes from things that I really care about. So there is probably an aspect of your career that gets you the most passionate, whether that's, you know, a particular course of study, or helping kids from a particular type of background, or women's issues, or mental health, or graduate school. And when you find that, look for ways to continually go back to that. I had to work a long time at a lot of jobs that I didn't really care about, but always looking for an opportunity to explore my passions. And then I've been in this for 30 plus years, and I finally arrived at this dream job where everything lines up perfectly with what I'm passionate about. But I had to, you know, work the overnight shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. for 2 years straight as part of my journey to get here. But I was always looking for those things, you know, Black issues, equal rights, basketball, hip hop, that really spoke to my passions and gave me practice and reps and pointed me in the right direction. So look for what you feel the strongest about and look for opportunities to work in those areas. That would be my advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well,
next question, Kyle Adams.
Jesse, first, I heard you talk about your daughter, that she played for John Tate.
Yep.
And for the Bruins. So I coached John's daughter at Cheney.
Oh, word? Wow.
Yeah. Did she play for? Was it Tate and Cash?
She played for Cash.
Also? Cash, an awesome coach.
Yeah.
She
played for Cash and Murray the year before that.
Okay. One of my questions, I've sat here and thought about 15 questions, but one of the things I want to ask you, as having children in the athletic ecosystem, and especially with a daughter, right? And having a daughter who was coached by men. What were some things that you saw, that you felt, and then and the same with Coltrane, as they made their college choice, what were some of the things that you were looking for their college coaches to be equipped with? What were some things that stood out to you with all the knowledge that you have in and around the game? You know, I know you know a bunch of coaches. I was talking to Brian Spriggs the other day about you.
Great guy.
But what were some, you know, what was your lens like as to what you were looking for in the coaches of your children?
Really, the things I was looking for didn't have much to do with basketball. I think at that level, they're all going to have the X's and O's. You know, I was looking for people who would really understand that my children are in a formative, perhaps the most formative period of their development. And I remember when I went away to college, and I didn't conceive it of this way at the time, but looking back on it, I totally reinvented myself. You arrive at college, you're there with a blank slate, you know, and you just, that's when you become an adult. And there are so many mistakes that are made along the way. and so many things that we have to do to mature. And I almost didn't make it, you know, and I didn't have that support system with my parents. I wasn't really, you know, like the basketball team, I was an afterthought. So that wasn't really, you know, my support system, but I did find peers and things like that helped me make it through by the grace of God. I took 6 years to get my degree from Yale University. Now I was in and out of there a couple of times. So what I was looking for was people with the understanding that these young people are going to disappoint you. They're going to screw up. They're going to let you down. So then where are you going to be? You know, are you going to cut and run? Are they going to wake up and find themselves transferred to, you know, some other school? Or are you there to help them as people? That was really what I was looking for. You know, and then as far as having them, my daughter coached by men, I was very glad that she chose to play for a woman in college, you know, and Cash, she had great coaches in AAU. And they elevated her game tremendously. And I'm very thankful that she got to play for them, because her AAU experience was a total other higher level than high school basketball, as we all know. But when it came down to the schools that her finalists that she was choosing, it was all women coaches, and I was glad for that. I really tried to stay out of all my kids' decisions and give them my opinion if they asked for it, and then you do what you feel is best. So the fact that my daughter chose to play for a Black woman, Coach Mosley, I think that is going to give her a tremendous experience, especially since Coach Mosley is a great coach. You know, I mean, she knows what she's doing up there. So.
All right. Are there any other questions before I, you know, ask my two questions of Jesse?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, it's Marla Gladstone. I'm a doctoral student at WVU. So I've been coaching men's basketball since 2002, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome.
So I just wanted to ask you, like, I was just thinking about the beginning of the book when John Thompson's talking about how he didn't have the freedom to make mistakes. And then we look at March Madness and see someone like Rick Pitino who's getting his third chance. And I just, as I was thinking about that, it kind of made my stomach sink. And then my second question is just, coaches always have the best stories. And I know you probably had to leave some out of the book, but can you draw on some of the ones that were just awesome that maybe didn't fit with what the book was going with?
Yeah. I'm tremendously distressed by some of the people I see coaching in college basketball right now. And I don't want to name names, but, you know, documented cheaters. And you know, I would not want my son to play for some of the people with some of the things that have been publicly disclosed about their past actions, just from a character issue. You know, I want my children to be coached by people with good character. The coach, if you are a student athlete at the Division I level, the coach is the most influential person in your life. They have the most control over your life. And that's a big responsibility. So yeah, Pitino, wow. I mean, at the same time, I don't begrudge anybody the chance to make a mistake and to get a second chance or a third or a fourth. But I find that very interesting. And then as far as the stories that we couldn't get in the book, there's one that comes to mind about, I'll just put it like this. And Coach didn't tell me not to put it in the book, but he didn't tell me to put it in. So Dikembe Mutombo was about to get married. And it was a big wedding, and it was in DC, and he had people coming in from Zaire. The bride had people coming in from all over the country, and the day before the wedding, there was still no prenup. Dikembe Mutombo did not marry that woman. Dikembe did not marry that woman. And Coach's description of how that happened from beginning to end, yo, wow. That's all that. There it is. There it
is. Next question, Yusuf Fitzgerald.
How y'all doing, man? I'm
Coach Yusef Fitzgerald, head coach down at Hines Community College, HBCU JUCO down in Mississippi. And Jesse, I come from, some different areas of the world where education has been a little bit where we've cut the education budget probably every year in America for the last, 15, 20 years, it seems like. And the disparity between, what we are provided in our culture and where we come from and the differences in what others are afforded. I know you worked your way up to go to Yale, and I'm dealing with guys that, even in a sense yesterday, one of my kids were, down at the police station because they were questioned about an incident that happened at the club. They didn't have anything to do with it, but the way the police called me was, hey, look, if he doesn't come down here and tell us what's going on, he's going to get hooked up too. And it's like, how can we bring the light through sports more of what we're dealing with on the backside of sports, not the basketball, not the on the court, but what these kids and these young men and young women are dealing with off the floor, after basketball, during basketball, lost to the wayside. How can we get to where that spotlight is placed on it and it stays? Because what happens is we have these moments and these movements, and they're great. And now I'm questioning how can we make it stick where it's an impact on the lower levels all the way through?
Man, Coach, wow. So first of all, so much respect for what you're doing and where you're working. These are the people who need us, who need basketball, who need you the most, and so really have a lot of respect for that. And your question shows, how much love you have for this community and what you're trying to do. And there's no easy answer. I wish I had the quick pat thing. How do we make this stick? How do we put the spotlight on the least of these? How do we let these people know that you're working with, that we care about them? Man, and it's got to be brick by brick. Isn't that the phrase that people use? One foot in front of the other, day after day. And it takes, the task can seem insurmountable, right? It can seem like, wow, how can we ever get to the top of this? But then, and this is a little corny, I'll admit, but then just popped into my head was when Coach Thompson got to Georgetown in 1972, for him to get to where he got, that task must have seemed insurmountable, and the whole state of things. I think he was the 5th or 6th Black Division I coach in the country, and so, and I would say, man, don't be afraid to reach out to me personally. Somebody earlier mentioned that I have a voice, and I take that's a big responsibility. And my responsibility, and this is something that I really got out of the book. Coach Thompson felt he had a responsibility to help other people, to speak out for those like the guys that you're trying to help, and to reach down. And in my little way, with my little, name out here, I feel the same responsibility. And so on a very specific level, please reach out to me and call my attention to it, and I can help spread the word. And hopefully it will build from there. That situation that you described to me hurt my heart because it overlaps with so many issues that we have in the Black community with these young Black men who are trying to get by, wrong place, wrong time, and their margin for error is non-existent. And your whole life can be poof in a minute, And these are the dudes who have athletic talent. So if you don't, so Coach Fitzgerald, man, please put your contact information in there and know that people care about what you're doing and respect what you're doing. I wish I could be more specific than that, and I'm going to keep thinking about it, and I hope we can keep in contact about actually, if you're helping a lot of kids, if I could help you help one kid, then I will consider that to be a worthwhile endeavor.
I appreciate that, Jesse. Thanks, Kel, man, a whole lot, man.
Always, brother. Always, Next question, Darrell Robinson.
Hello, Jesse. Darrell Robinson here at Danville High School, Danville, Illinois, my hometown, back coaching here. First of all, I want to say thanks, man, for this book. This is the best book that I've ever read. Hey, no disrespect to Aisha Foy on here. I haven't read your book yet. I'm gonna order it this weekend. So as for now, this is the best book I've ever read. Like I feel like I've grown so much in this book, like with so many different aspects and avenues. One of the most powerful lines in that book that really got to me was, and I always pride myself on it, is what he's saying. I think he said to where respecting or knowing other people's problems, understanding other people's problems, and that just hit so powerful to me. My question for you is, how did you feel like that you've grown from writing a book?
Well, let me just take a pause here. And like, we just went from Mississippi to Danville, Illinois, and a lot of other places I don't even know. This group is incredible. You guys really have something here, man. So Coach Sutton, props to you for convening it and for inviting me. I feel energized and empowered just connecting with y'all. And I really, really hope that this is not the last time. You know, I hope that this turns into something more because we all have something in common, which is trying to help people. So what did I take away from it? So much. You know, my kids, I got 4 kids in the crib, you know, 3 because I got 1 out there with Coach O'Driscoll. And they're tired of me quoting Coach Thompson. You know, they tired of it.
You don't know how many people that I just recommend, hey man, you gotta read this book. I mean, it's like blacks, whites, not even coaches sometimes, you know, just people. I'm like, man, you just gotta read this book. I'm like, man, you can grow so much from it, you know? So it's amazing.
So I grew from it also. And the biggest thing that I got is that as I changed my vocabulary with how I talk about opportunities that I have earned. You know, and coaches' insistence on, man, I don't have to apologize or be grateful for what I'm supposed to have, for what I earned, for the rights that God gave me. And I'm like, you know, I'm a laid back dude, and I'm someone who is, you know, I like to show my appreciation, but that can go over the line into being like, you know, you have to don't let the people who are giving you what you've earned act like they're doing you a favor. What was it that the way Coach described it? You know, he said, these people give you what you're supposed to have and then act like it's some sort of religious experience for them to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So when we're like, oh, thank you, I really, you know, I'm grateful for that. So I changed my vocabulary and I say, I appreciate this opportunity rather than I'm grateful or I'm so thankful. You know, I appreciate what's going on here. You know, I appreciate
John Thompson was one of the greatest people ever.
Hey, there it is. There it is. So that's what I got from the book.
Gotcha. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And the final question tonight goes to Ryan Highland.
Jesse, thank you so much. You know, we covered a ton, obviously, and a lot of these questions that have already come through, but wanted to touch on something you kind of mentioned right in the beginning about making this his book. I think that's really powerful and really important. And, you know, I think that comes with a huge responsibility for you too, you know, after his passing, kind of be his voice and sit here tonight like this and answer questions almost as if you were him or in his shoes with the research that you've done. And just wondering about how you feel about that responsibility and how you look to carry that on over the coming months and years.
Yeah. So I think the responsibility that I have, especially since he's not here, is this right here, you know, to make sure that the message gets out. I'm inspired. If my enthusiasm can transfer over and uplift y'all's enthusiasm, to put these philosophies into effect, to really let people know that this thing, you know, we get seduced by the glory and the buckets and the clicks and the likes and the money, but at the end of the day, it's not about that. And you know, if we can get that focus back on, because it's tough with basketball, you know, to do that. And that's That's what draws so many people to it. And so, the responsibility I feel, and we've had a lot of challenges in our household with keeping basketball in the proper perspective, because from the way I see it, the message that gets out there to these kids is the grind. You got to work out 5 hours a day, and you got to put your all into it. And you got to be totally focused on this basketball and Kobe and Michael and all this, this tunnel vision. And so that can come at the expense of being a well-rounded, productive member of society. It's hard for a kid to have a summer job. Coach John Thompson, this is something that I don't know if it made the book as much as it should have, but he required all of his players to have a job every summer, and not some lifeguard job, like, a job where you had to wear a tie or something like that. That's gone from basketball now. That's gone. We're working out every summer. It's a year-round thing. And so to get the focus back on some of those other aspects, I think, is the responsibility that I feel to make sure that coach's message rings out. That's why I was very gratified when the book got to the NCAA tournament, when the University of the District of Columbia, from which he has a master's degree, is making it required reading for all freshmen. That is the type of responsibility that I feel to make sure that his message, people understand what it is that he was trying to say.
Jesse, it's 9:04, and here at the Living Trophy Master Zoom class, we're always respectful of our guest speaker's time. We cannot thank you enough for being our first speaker of season 2 here at the Living Trophy Master Zoom class. When we talked about you coming on, I asked you to be a killer, and you were. Everyone on here tonight got better, no question, because of you. You were so authentic, you were so giving, and you shared so much, and we'll continue to grow from it. So I want to say thank you. Thank you very much for coming on. And I want to thank everybody that took the opportunity tonight to come here. You invested in yourselves, so you got better tonight, and then the people that you serve will be better tomorrow. So continue to and be intentional. That's our word. Is we're always going to be intentional. So be intentional about your self-care. Be intentional about being a leader, and always remember to be that ladle that fills the buckets of the people that you serve, and impact lives, and do what we always do, and that's what we do at a high level, is create living trophies. So I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. Jesse, fantastic. You started us off, and we keep going every Thursday. So every Tuesday, the invitations go out and the information goes out, and you certainly will be a part of that list of people. And don't be surprised if almost every person on here tonight reaches out and contacts you in some way, shape, or form, because that's what we're all about. We're about connecting, and our biggest thing that we try to do is we believe in giving hope, because we use hope as that acronym of helping other people excel. So thank you so much for coming in here tonight, Jesse. You were fantastic. You were that killer that I wanted you to be. And I want to thank the tribe, because you have no idea how much that I have missed you, from season 1 to now to season 2. So let's just keep doing this thing. Let's keep impacting lives. Let's keep creating living trophies. So thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Coach Sutton, save that chat. I want to make sure that I get all these emails. I tried to do it, but make sure you save that chat. I need these contacts. Thank you so much. I got better today. I really did.
Can I say one thing, Kev?
Yes, sir. Oh,
hey, Jesse, we go back. This was 4 years ago. Your son he was a high school kid. I was at Hofstra at the time. He was doing an article.
Okay.
I never saw the
article. Remember you.
I want to say, hey, I didn't even realize it until you said your son. And I was like, hold up. Now, I brag about, I read the book in less than 36 hours. I did sleep 8 hours, Kev, and I had to eat. So I couldn't put the book down on Christmas Day to 36 hours later. So, but I want to say congratulations. I mean, it was an outstanding book. It's my wife says, it's not too many people that get you a chance to read book, and I couldn't put it down. It was outstanding, but I just
I
want to
remember
say,
you. I pulled up on you at the Adidas tournament in New York
yes,
City.
you did. Yes, you
Off
did.
the blue, you didn't know me from a can of paint, and I was like,
I did. I did.